There are moments that slice your life into a clean before and a terrifying after. Mine happened on a sweltering afternoon with the smell of jasmine in the air. He said he was going to teach me to breathe, but I almost ran out of air completely. Before I get into the details of how I ended up in this impossible situation, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It's crazy to think how far this story might go. We had just arrived at my sister Chloe's country estate, this sprawling, isolated paradise that always felt more like a beautiful cage. The heat was suffocating, sticking my linen dress to my skin as Chloe chattered on about the dinner menu, completely oblivious to the storm brewing inside me after another fight with my husband. And then I saw him, Julian. My brother-in-law wasn't on the porch with the others, all smiles and welcome drinks. He was standing alone by the old oak tree, perfectly still, just watching us pull up. When his eyes found mine, it wasn't a casual glance. It was a physical shock, like a current running straight through me, making the fine hairs on my arms stand up. Everyone else saw a wife and a sister arriving for the weekend. He saw something else. He saw the cracks in my polite smile, the tremor in my hands I was trying to hide. And in that one long, silent, suffocating moment, I knew this weekend wasn't going to be a peaceful retreat. It was going to be a war. Dinner was a special kind of torture I never knew existed. I sat there, a ghost at my own family gathering, the clinking of silverware against porcelain sounding like alarm bells in my head. Chloe was on my right, radiant and oblivious, recounting some story about a charity gala, her laughter filling the space Julian's silence had created. And he was directly across from me. Every time I dared to lift my eyes from my plate, he was already there, watching me. His gaze wasn't accusatory or even flirtatious. It was something far more dangerous. It was knowing. It was a silent conversation that only the two of us were having, a dark thread connecting us across the polished oak table, invisible to everyone else. "Elara, you need more wine," Chloe insisted, already motioning for Julian to pass the bottle. His hand brushed mine as he set it down, a flicker of contact so brief it should have meant nothing, but it sent a jolt straight up my arm, a searing heat that made me flinch. I snatched my hand back as if I'd been burned, my breath catching in my throat. I saw the corner of his mouth twitch, the faintest hint of a smile, and I knew he'd felt it too. He was playing with me. Every small gesture was a test. When I dropped my napkin, he bent to retrieve it at the same moment I did, our heads nearly colliding under the table. For a split second, we were hidden in the shadows, his face inches from mine. The scent of his cologne, sandalwood and something clean like rain, filling my senses. The world stopped. All I could hear was the frantic pounding of my own heart. He held my gaze for a beat too long before straightening up, his expression perfectly composed as he handed me the linen square. "Here you go," he said, his voice smooth as velvet, while his eyes screamed 1,000 unspeakable things. I felt like a fraud, smiling and nodding at my sister's stories, while my body was humming with this forbidden electricity, this terrifying awareness of the man who was her husband. Later, the house fell into a deep, oppressive silence. Sleep was impossible. My mind was a racetrack of what-ifs and the ghost of his touch. I slipped out of bed, needing air, needing to escape the image of his eyes that was burned into my mind. I found myself drawn to the veranda, the same spot where he had taught me to breathe, where he had stolen my breath instead. And of course, he was there, leaning against the railing, a silhouette against the moonlight, as if he had been waiting. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird. I should have turned back, run to the safety of my room, but my feet were rooted to the spot. He turned slowly, and even in the dim light, I could feel the intensity of his stare. "I had a feeling you couldn't sleep either," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in the humid night air. He didn't move from his spot, but the space between us felt charged, impossibly small. I just hugged my arms around myself, a pathetic attempt to hold myself together. It's just the heat," I stammered, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. He took a deliberate step towards me, and then another. He stopped when he was so close I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Is that all it is, Elara?" he murmured, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He reached out, not to touch me, but to tuck a stray strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers grazed my cheek, a feather-like touch that left a trail of fire in its wake. "Because from where I'm standing," he continued, his eyes locked on mine, "the heat has nothing to do with the weather." It wasn't a question, it was a statement. The subtext was gone, replaced by a raw, terrifying truth that hung between us. He knew, and he knew that I knew. The game of glances was over. This was something real, something tangible, and I had no idea how to survive it. My protest was a pathetic, breathless thing, a single word lost in the humid night. Don't. But the word had no conviction. It was a ghost of the woman I was supposed to be, the loyal sister, the faithful wife. He didn't even flinch. His eyes, dark pools in the moonlight, held mine captive as he slowly, deliberately lowered his hand from my face. For a wild, stupid second, I thought he was listening, that he was pulling back. Instead, his hand found the wall behind me, his arm caging me in. The other hand came to rest on my hip, his thumb pressing gently into the bone, a gesture of ownership that sent a fresh wave of fire through my veins. The space was gone. There was no air left between us, only the suffocating electric heat. I could feel the solid muscle of his chest against the thin linen of my dress, feel the steady, calm beat of his heart that was a stark contrast to the frantic hummingbird trapped in my own ribcage. "We can't," I whispered, the words aimed more at myself than at him. "Julian, she's upstairs. She's my sister." His name on my lips felt like a sin and a prayer all at once. A small, humorless smile touched his lips. He leaned in closer, his mouth now just inches from mine, his breath warm and smelling faintly of the wine from dinner. "She's asleep, Elara," he murmured, his voice a low, hypnotic vibration that made my knees weak. "She's dreaming, but we're not." He was right. This felt more real than anything I had experienced in years. The world outside this small, charged bubble had faded to black. There was no Chloe, no husband, no right or wrong. There was only the solid weight of him against me, and the terrifying, exhilarating promise in his eyes. My hands, of their own volition, came up to rest on his chest. I meant to push him away, I swear I did, but my fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt instead, clinging to him. All pretense had been incinerated. My body had betrayed every rational thought in my head, choosing this moment, this man, without my permission. He dipped his head, his forehead resting against mine. I closed my eyes, a silent surrender. I could feel his eyelashes flutter against my skin. "Tell me to stop," he breathed against my lips, the command of velvet-wrapped dare. I knew he didn't mean it. He knew I couldn't say it. My silence was his answer. It was all the permission he needed. As he tilted his head to finally close the last impossible millimeter between us, a sudden, sharp creak came from the floorboards directly above us, followed by the muffled sound of a light switch flicking on. We both froze, two statues carved from guilt and adrenaline, his lips hovering a hair's breadth from mine. The spell was shattered, but the damage was done. We hadn't kissed, but we had crossed a line from which there was no return, and the light from my sister's bedroom was now shining down on us, like a spotlight. The light from upstairs died as suddenly as it had appeared. We didn't breathe. We didn't move. We just listened to the silence, to the faint sound of floorboards settling, and then nothing. The threat was gone, but the danger, the real danger, had just been invited in. That shared moment of pure, heart-stopping fear didn't push us apart. It fused us together. It was the final straw, the last excuse incinerated by adrenaline. Julian's eyes found mine in the dark, and there was no question in them anymore, only a raw, possessive hunger. He didn't say a word. He just lowered his head, and his mouth crashed against mine. It wasn't a kiss. It was a collision, a desperate, starved claiming of territory that had been silently contested for years. All the stolen glances, the accidental touches, the unspoken words erupted in that single furious point of contact. My hands, which had been pushing against his chest, were now clinging to him, my fingers digging into the muscles of his shoulders as I pulled him impossibly closer. He tasted of wine and secrets. A low groan rumbled in his chest, a sound of surrender and victory all at once, and it undid me completely. My mind went blank. Every protest, every thought of my sister, my husband, my life, erased by the sheer force of this. This was not a choice. It was a chemical reaction, an inevitability. He broke the kiss only to drag me from the veranda, his hand locked around my wrist, pulling me through the silent house. We moved like ghosts, our feet silent on the cool tile, the only sound our ragged breathing. He led me into the library, the air thick with the scent of old paper and leather, and pushed the heavy door shut. The click of the latch was the loudest sound in the world, the final seal on our sin. He pinned me against the door, and this time there were no interruptions, no near misses. It was a desperate, frantic shedding of layers, both of clothing and of years of restraint. It was the urgency of 1,000 repressed moments finally breaking free, a physical confession that was messy and overwhelming and felt more honest than anything I had ever known. I woke up to a sliver of sunlight cutting across my own bed, the sheets tangled around my legs. For a blissful, ignorant second, I didn't remember. Then it all came flooding back in a tidal wave of heat and shame. I was alone. The other side of the bed was cold. I pressed my fingers to my lips, which felt bruised and swollen, and I could still smell the faint masculine scent of him on my skin, a ghost in my room. The guilt was a physical weight in my chest, so heavy I could barely breathe. Downstairs, I could hear Chloe humming, the cheerful, oblivious sound of her making coffee. The sound was like a drill boring into my skull. Every happy note was an accusation. I felt like a monster, a snake she had welcomed into her home. I pulled on a robe, my hands trembling as I tied the sash, and forced myself to leave the room. The house felt different. The air was thick with our secret. Every shadow in the hallway seemed to hold a memory from the night before. When I entered the kitchen, Chloe turned with a bright smile. "Morning, sleepyhead. You look exhausted." Her words were innocent, but they felt like a perfectly aimed jab. And then I saw him. Julian was sitting at the table, a coffee cup in his hand, looking as calm and composed as if nothing had happened. He looked up as I walked in, and his eyes met mine. It was only for a second, but the electricity was still there, a live wire connecting us across the room. In that one look, he said everything. He remembered the taste of my skin, the sound of my breath catching, the way I clung to him in the dark. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk played on his lips before he turned his attention back to his coffee, leaving me standing there, exposed and trembling under my sister's cheerful gaze. The silence in the room was deafening, filled with the things we had done. Chloe chattered on about her plans for the day, completely unaware that her entire world had been fractured while she slept. and the two people responsible were now standing in her kitchen, bound by a dirty, delicious, and utterly devastating secret. The next day was a performance. I woke up with a singular, desperate mission: to act normal, to pretend that the library had just been a room full of books, that my skin didn't still hum with the memory of his touch, that my sister's home hadn't become the stage for the greatest betrayal of my life. I avoided his eyes at breakfast, focusing on the pattern of the porcelain plate with an intensity that was probably more suspicious than just looking at him. I chattered with Chloe, my voice sounding brittle and fake to my own ears, asking about her garden, the neighbors, anything to fill the suffocating silence that only Julian and I could feel. He, on the other hand, was a master of deception, cool, calm, a faint, polite smile on his face as he discussed estate matters with my sister. He was infuriatingly good at this. I made an excuse to go for a walk alone, claiming a headache, needing the open air to clear the fog of guilt and desire from my head. I walked deep into the woods surrounding the property, the crunch of leaves under my feet the only sound, and I told myself it was over. A moment of madness, a terrible, unforgivable mistake that would never, ever happen again. I repeated it like a mantra. It was over. It had to be. Of course, he was there, leaning against an old stone wall that marked the edge of the property as if he knew my exact escape route. "Running away, Alara?" he asked, his voice low and devoid of judgment. It was a simple statement of fact. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Don't," I said, the word coming out as a weak puff of air. "We can't. That was a mistake." He pushed himself off the wall and walked towards me, his steps slow and deliberate. "Was it?" he murmured, stopping just in front of me. It didn't feel like a mistake. He raised a hand and tucked a stray piece of hair behind my ear, the same gesture from the veranda. But this time it wasn't a question. I flinched, but didn't pull away. The magnetic pull was too strong, a physical force I was powerless against. Just then, in the distance, we heard Chloe's voice calling my name, a cheerful, lilting sound that was like a knife in my gut. Panic seized me. Julian didn't even react. Instead, he leaned in, his mouth hovering just over mine, and whispered, "She'll call again. We have about 60 seconds. The sheer audacity of it, the thrill of the deadline, shattered my resolve. I was a moth drawn to a devastating flame. My hands found his shirt, and I pulled him to me, our mouths meeting in a frantic, desperate kiss, fueled by the adrenaline of being caught. It was messy and rushed, and tasted of fear. When we heard her call my name again, closer this time, we broke apart. He gave me a knowing, wicked smile, turned, and vanished back into the trees. I stood there for a moment, my lips burning, my body trembling, before I composed my face into a mask of innocence and walked back towards the house, towards my sister's voice, our shared crime, a hot, invisible brand between us. The weekend bled into a week, and our secrets settled into a dangerous rhythm. The initial shock and guilt didn't disappear, but they were buried under layers of intoxicating risk. We became experts in the art of the stolen moment. A hand brushing mine as we reached for the same serving spoon at dinner, the contact lingering for a fraction of a second too long. His foot finding mine under the table, a silent, illicit conversation happening right under Chloe's nose. We grew bolder, more reckless, addicted to the surge of adrenaline that came with every near miss. The house, once a beautiful cage, was now our personal labyrinth, and we were finding new, dark corners to get lost in. The library became our sanctuary, our confessional. One night, long after Chloe had gone to bed, we found ourselves there again. The air was thick with the scent of old leather and our unspoken need. It wasn't the frantic, desperate collision of our first time. It was slower, more deliberate, a deep exploration of a territory we had only just discovered. We were so lost in each other, so consumed by the moment, that we got careless. In the middle of it all, with my back pressed against a shelf of priceless first editions, we heard it. A creak. The same floorboard from the first night, but this time it was followed by the soft padding of footsteps coming down the main staircase. My blood ran cold. We froze, a tangled mess of limbs in the pitch-black room. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. He pulled me behind a large leather armchair, our bodies pressed together, barely daring to breathe. A sliver of light cut through the darkness as the kitchen light flicked on. It was Chloe. She was humming softly to herself, the sound a cheerful counterpoint to the silent terror screaming in my veins. We heard the refrigerator open, the clink of a glass, the sound of running water. She was feet away, separated only by a wall and her own innocence. I could feel Julian's heart beating a steady, calm rhythm against my cheek, while mine felt like it was going to explode. It was the longest minute of my life. Then the light clicked off, and we heard her footsteps retreat up the stairs. We didn't move for a long time, just stood there in the suffocating darkness, the aftershock of our near discovery vibrating between us. In that moment, looking at the empty doorway she had just passed, I didn't recognize the woman I had become. Who was this person who hid in the dark, whose body trembled not just with fear, or with a sick, exhilarating thrill? I was trapped in a labyrinth of my own making, entangled with my sister's husband, and the most terrifying truth of all was that I didn't want to find the way out. I was addicted to the poison, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I would let it destroy me. The breaking point didn't come with a scream or a slammed door. It came with the soft rustle of old paper. I found Chloe in the sitting room, a dusty photo album open on her lap, the warm lamplight catching the tears glistening on her cheeks. My heart seized in my chest, a cold, hard knot of pure panic. She knows. The thought was a lightning strike, short-circuiting my entire nervous system. I stood frozen in the doorway, my mind racing through every stolen glance, every secret touch, trying to pinpoint our mistake. But when she looked up at me, her eyes weren't filled with accusation. They were shining with a devastating, innocent happiness. "Look," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion as she patted the space on the sofa next to her. I moved like a robot, my limbs stiff with dread, and sat down. She pointed to a photograph of her and Julian at their wedding. They were radiant, caught mid-laugh, the picture of perfect love. "I was just thinking," she started, wiping a tear from her cheek with the back of her hand. "How lucky I am. How did I get so lucky, Ilara?" The question was a physical blow. I couldn't breathe. She wasn't looking at me, just at the photo, lost in the memory. He's such a good man, so steady, so whole. He holds our entire world together. She finally turned to me, her smile so genuine it was like staring into the sun. "And I have you, my sister, my best friend, the two people I love most in the world, right here. It's everything I've ever wanted." She squeezed my hand, her touch a brand of shame on my skin. In that moment, the thrill was gone, the intoxicating danger, the electric charge, all of it curdled into something ugly and toxic in the pit of my stomach. I wasn't a woman caught in a passionate affair. I was a parasite, feeding on the happiness of the one person who trusted me implicitly. The secret was no longer a weight. It was a living thing with claws, and it was tearing me apart from the inside. I looked at her beautiful, trusting face, and all I could see was the ruin we were building right under her feet. I saw the aftermath, the explosion, the way her smile would shatter into a million pieces when she finally knew. And I knew, with a certainty that felt like a death sentence, that I was the one holding the match. It couldn't go on. It had to stop. Not tomorrow, not next week. It had to end tonight. before I destroyed her completely. I found him in the library, of course, our place. He was standing by the window, looking out into the darkness, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He turned as I entered, a slow, knowing smile touching his lips, the kind of smile that just hours ago would have made my knees weak. Tonight, it made me sick. "I was waiting for you," he said, his voice a low murmur. Before he could take a step towards me, I held up a hand. "Stop," I choked out, the word tasting like acid. "Julian, we have to stop this. All of it. It's over." The smile vanished from his face, replaced by that unnerving stillness. He took a slow sip of his whiskey, his eyes never leaving mine. "What brought this on?" he asked, his tone dangerously calm. I started pacing, my arms wrapped around myself as if I could physically hold my shattered conscience together. "Chloe," I said, my voice cracking. "She was looking at your wedding photos. She was crying, Julian, crying because she's so happy." I finally stopped and faced him, my body trembling with a toxic cocktail of guilt and fury. "Don't you feel anything? Don't you see what we're doing? We are building a bomb in the middle of her life, and you're just standing here drinking whiskey like it's nothing." He set the glass down with a heavy, deliberate click. "It's not nothing, Ilara," he said, his voice dropping, taking a step closer. "You think I don't know what's at stake?" He was in front of me now, his presence overwhelming, radiating the same heat that had first drawn me in. "But it's too late. What's happened between us, it didn't start this week. It started years ago. This was always going to happen." I shook my head, tears blurring my vision. "No, I won't let it. I'm ending it." He reached out and cupped my face, his thumb stroking my cheek, and I hated myself for leaning into his touch. "You can't end this," he whispered, his gaze intense, possessive. His mouth descended on mine, and for one shameful, desperate moment, I kissed him back. I kissed him with all the guilt and fear and self-loathing I felt, a frantic, punishing kiss that was more about goodbye than desire. Then I tore myself away, stumbling backward. "Stay away from me," I breathed, my whole body shaking. He didn't move. He just watched me, his expression a mixture of regret and grim certainty. "This isn't over," he said, not as a threat, but as a terrible, undeniable prophecy. "We've lit the fuse, Ilara. Now we just have to wait for the explosion." I stared at him, my heart hammering against my ribs, and I knew he was right. We had passed the point of no return. We weren't lovers in a secret affair anymore. We were just two people, standing in the wreckage of a future we had already destroyed, waiting for the walls to finally come crashing down.